Hey guys, Joey Mathis here, and I have Michael Bowman, who's been my partner for God knows how many years.
Decade.
Yeah, but you started here in 1999, so we've been together for over 20 years now. Jiminy Christmas, 24 years.
It's been awesome.
Anyway, really great lawyer, and today we're going to go over the top four screw ups people make when setting up their business entity. And I don't want to do any ado. I don't want to wait. I want to dive into this, Michael. So I'm going to hand it to you. What are the four top screw ups that you see? And you've been doing this a long time and you deal with this stuff day in and day out. What are the four big screw ups you see when people set up a business entity?
The first thing that I mentioned it, or when you mentioned it, and when I started talking about it and looking at just going back in my past, I'm a recovering litigation attorney. So I
Mm-hmm.
actually had to deal with it in court when people would make these screw ups. And so we have got everything from an address, as simple as that, as the address. When you go and file on Secretary of State, what address do you use? To the documentation behind it, selecting the tax status. That's been a big problem with some of my clients. Commingling, another huge problem because obviously you're trying to work on the business and you get a little lazy here. Documentation, not keeping accurate books and records from an accounting standpoint, multidimensional on the problems with that. But I think the realm that you're going to look at it here, or that we want to look at, is not treating the business like a business. Each of the four things that we're going to be going over, it's because a individual does not treat the business like a business. And I can tell you firsthand, when you're in the court system and you're looking at the judge is looking at it, they're going to look and see if that owner, that business owner, the person running the business, if they treat it like the business. If the individual didn't treat it like a business, then why should the court make the plaintiff treat it like a business? And so the protection that these business entities afford you goes out the window. Again, bottom line, treat the business like a business, have respect for it. The courts will have respect for it. And if you get into a jury, but treat the business like a business.
All right. So I clerked as well. And from the bench side, they always say the amount of respect I'll show something is the amount of respect you show something. But people are setting up a business for tax benefits, estate planning benefits, raising money for that business purposes. And the big one is liability protection. And liability protection, there's really two sides to it, right? There's the liability of the business that is generated. Like, let's say I'm a plumber and I flood somebody's house and I get sued in the business. You want to make sure it doesn't come and take all your personal assets, and vice versa. If I get into a personal car accident because I'm not paying attention, I don't want them to come take my business away. And so these businesses that we set up, when we set up a business entity, and you're usually using corporations, LLCs, limited partnerships, things like that, there's all these benefits, and you see people undo it. And so let's focus like a laser beam into the top four that you've seen. I know that you said you were coming today with four areas that you see people repeatedly screwing up on. And what's the first area that you see?
Well, let's get to the very basic. The very first thing that you're going to be doing, you're going to be going ahead and filing it with the Secretary of State or whatever state you're doing business. Generally, you're going to choose the state in which you're touching and concerning citizens of the particular state. Unless you're not touching, then you can choose the jurisdiction that's favorable to your business and to yourself. So the first thing is your address that you're using when you file that initial incorporation paperwork or the formation paperwork for any sort of entity whatsoever. That is the biggest mistake. We get a lot of clients who have already set up a business and they come to us and they say, hey, have I done it right? You never want to knock someone down because they did take an initial step. But the first thing I see is that their business or their personal address is listed as their business address. And from a legal standpoint, from a practical standpoint, from a personal standpoint, each of them are a little bit at odds with each other. But seeing people use their personal address is so wrong on so many different levels.
And so you're talking about, like, let's say I set up a business. Again, let's just say it's a plumbing business. And I'll set it up, and you'll see people that actually put their personal home address. And there's two areas that you look at, right? There's a registered agent, which is every business has to have. And then there's also the business address. And they'll put their home addresses both, right? And you'll see them just like if there's a dispute, someone's going to show up at your house.
At
Or if
your
you're going
house,
to get,
where you have your family, where you have your neighbors watching. Yes, think of how bad that is.
yeah, you tick off a client. Like I always think of this. I have a psychiatrist is one of my clients, and he's like, Toby, I don't want my name anywhere in the public records,
Sure.
because some of these folks, they're not well, but oftentimes they're looking for something. They're always looking for help, and sometimes it's drugs, and sometimes it's something else. But they'll hunt them down, and he's like, I don't want my name out there. You see this going on with police officers, by the way. They're the only ones. Like, there's a lot of public officials
Politicians too.
yeah, they can have their names out of the public record, and this is why. And then you just undid that by sticking your name and your in your home address out there for the whole world to see, as though it's a business address. I mean,
And a
there's
lot
all
of people
sorts of
don't
bad
even know
things.
any better, and they haven't thought this through, and haven't been exposed to it. They're just doing the best they can. But whenever we see this inside, when we review their documents as when a new client comes in, it's tough to see that because the exposure that they're from a legal standpoint, but then from, like you're mentioning, the personal standpoint, gosh, it just makes your heart hurt a little bit. And again, people don't know what a registered agent is.
Mhm.
That's something I've seen in the last 3 or 4 years. Before a registered agent, you just listed it down. It was fine. The courts really laxed on the service of process. Let's say, and I'll use the case example that kind of unwound this. But if you went back 5, 10, 15 years ago, and the service of process got delivered to a person at your house, let's say a grandmother, maybe an immigrant grandmother who didn't speak English, and she took the papers and set them aside, you could go into the court, say, hey, this is what happened, and you would be a motion to set aside default judgment. And the courts would grant it.
Wait, hold on for a second. Time out, because I want to make sure everybody understands what you're talking about. You're talking about if they serve you and you
Yes.
never actually get the pleadings because they gave it to a family member at the house, who
Which
then deep
is
sixed
good
it, or
process of
yeah,
service. They completed it, yeah, and that went away. You never saw it. You could go to the court, and the court really at the time wanted to try the cases on the merits. That was the premise
yeah,
of it,
not
not a
anymore.
procedural mishap. And but then a case came out where exactly that happened. They listed themselves as a registered agent, and the grandmother or the mother received the papers, put them aside, didn't know how important it was to it. The court said, no, wait, when you list that registered agent,
Yep.
you are responsible to be business hours available to accept that service of process. You didn't meet the requirement. We're not going to do it. That started, and then it kind of went through other states like a virus, if you will. The other thing, like you're mentioning, you're listing your personal residence there. It's where you have your family, your home, your neighbors. So don't do it. Use a commercial registered agent. We're a registered agent, and keep them away from your personal house, and be able to make sure that you get notice of that lawsuit so you can respond.
Yeah, and let's interject too. Also, from a like business credit standpoint,
Hmm.
a lot of lenders are going to look at the address and look to see if it's a commercial address, and they're not going to loan to you if it's a residential address. They
Nope.
don't loan to individuals under those circumstances, and a lot of them only want to loan to an actual commercial business, especially if you're looking at non-recourse. You're just not going to get it. And so it's really important that you actually establish a separate identity and a separate location for that business. It's not expensive. Just do it.
So I always like to look at it from the legal side, the practical side, and generating revenue and the business side of it. I was looking for a service provider. So what do? I go to Google, put my location in, and see if there's any service providers in the service that I was looking for. And I found a few that were in a neighborhood. What does that tell me about the business? That just came way down for me.
Yeah, it's not a real business at that point. Again, the amount of respect you show your business is the amount of respect third parties will show it, including courts and investors and banks and everybody, right? So you want to have your business treated with respect. After all, you're spending your time and energy to put these things together. You set up an entity. You want the benefits of it. Don't screw it up by putting your personal address. So that's number one. What's number two screw up that you see all the time?
Organizational paperwork, the documents. For a corporation, it's going to be the bylaws. For an LLC, it's going to be the operating agreement. That is number one and number two. Generally, they're messed up together. However, absolutely going to be the organizational documents. I have a great story that illustrates this. I was speaking at an event in Las Vegas, and this really cute elderly couple comes up to me, and I was taking a break, And they come up to me and say, Michael, we are so excited because this LLC that you're talking about, we already have one. And I was super excited because, they were excited about what I was sharing with them. They said, "Hey, we've got it here. Can we go sit and can you review it for us?" I said, "Absolutely. Let's go sit down." We sat at this high top table, and I open up the first page of it, and it was for an LLC, and it says bylaws for ABC LLC. Let's say the company name. So it's bylaws for ABC
Oops.
LLC, and you're starting to chuckle. A lot of people, lay people, wouldn't even understand. Well, you chuckled because bylaws are for
Corporations, right?
corporations. This was for an LLC. So I said, okay, you know what? Maybe we could do a little whiteout and just change it to operating agreement of ABC LLC. And I started reading through it. It was drafted like bylaws. It made no mentions of the protections of an LLC. My heart's hurting again because they are so excited. How do I let them down easy and tell them what they spent money on is worthless? Got to the end of it and it said shares of ABC LLC. What's the problem with that?
You don't have shares in an LLC, a membership interest. I mean, it sounds to me like they went and they did probably something online or, a boilerplate. And the problem
Unfortunately,
again,
they went to an attorney, and the attorney charged them about $2,800 to get this
the
done.
attorney did that.
Attorney did that. We talked about it, and here's where it comes into the charging order protection applies to LLCs, and that's what they wanted. They wanted the protection for the asset against them, any sort of liability from themselves. I explained to them out, and we were able to help them out getting a good set of documents. But here's what the court's going to say is if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. This is a corporation. And if I was the plaintiff attorney coming after it, I'd have it treated as a corporation under the RMBCA, which is the Revised Model Business Corporation Act, knowing that the opposing counsel probably have no idea why I was doing that. The main thing is if I get treated like a corporation, that charging order does not apply. And the documentation matters. Plus, Toby, when we look at a business entity, we look at the documents, whether it's bylaws or we look at it from the operating agreement standpoint. A lot of people look at those as restrictions. No, they're actually privileges, and we got different abilities to take medical care reimbursements. It's all privileges and benefits that those documents give us. Plus, it also comes back to if we ever go into court, if you come in with just a manila piece of, or a folder full of, papers and you throw them down, you don't look that professional. You're not treating that business like a business, and then the court isn't going to treat it also. And it also goes on audits too. I've talked to many auditors who about this stuff, and they said, hey, if we come in and we see a well-organized set of documents, we might look at a few things, but we're out of there. The reason why is we know that those I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. Not a good place for us to spend our time. We're going to go to somewhere where, they've got just a couple of pieces of paper together to show their business, and then a shoebox full of receipts.
Yeah. And if you're banking or if you're trying to get a loan and your documents don't look the way that they want to see them, you're done. You're just going to get the
Presentation, right? Too.
Yeah, we always say it's the interpretation of the presentation. If your presentation sucks, don't expect to get the result that you want. And you just undid it. Again, you said this nice couple, somebody's is trying and they're doing what they can and they're undoing all the benefits of what they're setting up because they make these big mistakes. All right, that was number 2. Let's dive into number 3. What's the third area that you're seeing people screw up when they're setting up a business entity?
It's commingling and not separating personal from business. And that starts from the very beginning. It's bad in a couple ways. Number one, again, we're getting back to treat the business like a business. But when you start using business dollars on personal benefit or personal dollars on business benefit, I was involved in many of cases where the first thing that I would do is get a forensic accountant to go through the records and show every single time that individual disrespected that clear separation between the business and themselves. Why? Because then I could move the court to go ahead and, hey, if the business owner didn't respect that separation, why should my client?
And by commingling, you mean like money. Like a lot of times people will use the bank account interchangeably for their own. Like they'll start buying everything for themselves, their business, and they're like, oh, it's a write off. No, it's not. It has to be have a profit motive. And when you're expending that, there has to be some sort of reason, it's being used for a business sense. And if
Business
you're going
purpose.
out buying your groceries, yeah, if you're buying your groceries, you're just thumbing your nose at this thing saying, ha ha ha, I'm so cute. Don't expect a court to fall for that. And don't expect the IRS to fall for it. And don't expect an investor or a bank to be party to that. They're
No.
going to look at that and go, this is the earmarks of somebody who does not know how to run a business. It's not a business, it's a personal piggy bank that someone's just messing with, and we're not going to honor it by giving it any of our business.
You know what we're
And
seeing here a lot of is the formalization of an entity or treating with respect not only translates to great protection and liability protection for the
mhm.
business from you and you from the business, but we're also seeing it cross over from an IRS standpoint, an audit standpoint. And that would even lead into our next topic.
We got four, right? This is the fourth one, Michael. We've got four screw ups.
Four screw ups, and these are so common. Again, the attorneys here at Anderson, they deal with this every day, because I went and talked to them and polled them. It's keep good bookkeeping and records, making sure you
Books
have
and
a clear set of
records.
books.
Who would have thunk it, right? Here's my pet peeve, and I know you're going to dive into this, but my pet peeve is you always see these folks saying, "Oh, the formalities of a corporation are so much higher; they have to keep books and records." And I'm like, every business entity, whether you're a sole proprietor, a partnership, an S corp, a C corp, an LLC, tax as an S corp, LLC tax as a C corp, it does not matter what you are. You
No,
have the same books and records requirement. You have to keep a paper trail of what your expenditures are, and they screw it up all the time, right?
well, your pet peeve is my pet peeve because it's such a fallacy. I was actually wanting to start a business anyway when I was quite young. I was 19, 20, 21, right there. And even my father said, hey, you know what? It's too many corporate formalities. So I had it in my head that, oh my gosh, it's too much work. I got to do an annual report. I got to do an annual meeting. I got to have all these meetings. And all of a sudden, one of my buddies started his own business. I said, well, if that bozo can do it, so can I. Then I started realizing these meetings are actually more beneficial to me than a burden on me, because now all of a sudden I've got historical records of where I wanted to go. Did I get there? It held me accountable, but also I had a better finger on my financial pulse, because now I got a clean set of books instead of a shoebox full of receipts that I would just hand off on April 14th to my accountant. Now I can actually keep a finger on the financial pulse. I can look at
Mm-hmm.
my activities and I can say, okay, this one's generating profits. Okay, this activity over here is actually a drain and a deterrent from the actual profit centers that I had there. Whether you're a business owner, a real estate investor, a stock trader, you can look at your activities and have a better finger on the pulse of each activity, because it's all separated out. And then if you aren't generating the profits that you want, you can go ahead and make adaptations because you understand where you're at on each of those levels. But bookkeeping is something that I have a love-hate relationship. When I remember my first time working with QuickBooks, I was putting numbers in and it should have been decreasing columns. It was increasing columns. But once I got that down and actually employed a company to actually do my bookkeeping, I really felt like I was more in tune with my business,
Mm-hmm.
and I was able to jettison some of those activities. As emotionally attached as I was to them, I was able to jettison them off, and overall, it was better for the health of the business.
Yeah, you want to have a separate business. Remove yourself, right? If you are removed from the equation, what is left, and what is the story that the records tell, and that'll tell you how valuable your business is.
And you're not even able to see that because you're so emotionally involved into it at times too. But this
Well, you're
makes it more
there, but you
fun.
have to. When a bank is sitting there looking at it, underwriting a loan, they need to see the paper trail. They're not going to
Yeah.
sit there and be talking to you. That doesn't paper their file. That does not do what they need to do to justify a loan. Or if you're raising money from an angel investor, or you're pitching and trying to get new investors, it's not enough to say, "Oh, I told somebody." You have to document these things.
Yeah.
And I think what is really hitting here is that when you do not separate that business out from yourself, the
Yes.
default is it's you. And if it's you, lenders don't want to deal with it. They don't want to, that you're not going to be able to, courts are not going to honor the separateness. Um, Banks are not going to honor the separateness, and you're going to end up being not taken as seriously as you should be if you're a traditional business, and it'll cost you in the long run. So you just nailed four areas. Like I just want to go over them really quickly again. I think you had you're using your personal address. You're not creating a separate
Don't be our
commercial.
own RA and don't have your corporate address. Absolutely.
Yep, there's two of those, right? You have the registered agent required for the entity, and you have a physical address for the business. Got to make sure that those are commercial, especially for lending. Like they won't loan to a residential in many
Correct.
cases if it's a true commercial. So there's that one, which is using your personal address. Don't do that. Number two, I believe, was let's see,
The
the
formation,
document
the documents. There's something else
bylaws
I
and
want to add
operating.
in. Your resolutions, your consent to actions, things like that. And again, these things
That
are
goes to
all a
books and
benefit.
records. That was number three, right? Yeah, books and records. No, Commingle was three, and then books and records was number four.
Before.
So bad docs, using your personal address, uh, commingling
Commingling,
assets,
not
and
acceptable.
books and records, and not having good books and records. I think you
Yeah.
nailed it.
Yeah. Well, there's so many more. I think I have about 20 when I started brainstorming on this. Um, again, Anderson, one of the best successes we have is watching clients grow, and become successful. The next step of that is forming a nonprofit and start sharing that wealth. But,
Mhm.
there's no reason that these formalities should be looked at as a burden. They should be looked at as a benefit. And, we want businesses to succeed. It's been so fun to over the last couple of decades to watch businesses grow and still chat with those clients and reminisce about when they had one little business or when they had one investment property and now they've got hundreds of doors. And so, yeah, we just want everyone to be successful, and it's not that hard. You just have to pay attention to it, treat the business like a business, and you'll reap the benefits of it.
Perfect. Well, thanks for joining us, Michael. I'll put your information down below. They can always go to Anderson Advisors to find you, one of the partners here, and you can always reach out and contact him and say, "Hey, I'm worried about my business. Will you take a look at it?" Or better yet, "Hey, I'm thinking of setting up a business. Make sure you're doing it right."
Correct. Yeah. Wish everyone the best of success. Appreciate everyone.